Scorn is a beautifully disturbing game with all the body horror and disturbing sights one can find out of an H.R. Geiger aesthetic. And this is a game that's going to be very polarizing depending upon what you are expecting and what you think about horror and survival horror in general. Fortunately for me, with this game, there really is no story to spoil because Scorn doesn't really have a long-standing plot. You awaken in this very disturbing and fleshy world, and it's up to you to kind of figure out what is going on. There's a giant tower, and lots of things wanting to stab, impale, and other things to your flesh. Now, footage of this game can make it seem like it's from different genres. It could be a first-person shooter once we get access to weapons, could be survival horror, adventure, walking sim, and so on. But ultimately, from our play of Scorn, this game definitely sits more specifically in like the first generation of survival horror, where it is an adventure game that you can also fight and die in. If you're hoping for kind of like extreme shooting or the more jump scare or event focus elements of modern indie horror games, this is definitely not going to be the game for you. Instead, the bulk of this game is going to be about exploring this very realized and, again, disturbingly beautiful world. Each area is made up of one quote-unquote macro or major puzzle. To solve said puzzle, you'll have to solve the variety of smaller puzzles that are around. Now, because you're in a world where flesh and metal are kind of interchangeable, part of the challenge of this game is just figuring out what the heck does something do. And that something will change area by area, act by act. Once you've figured things out, you start moving through the puzzles, you'll get to more areas, and the game begins to open up. Now, with that said, this is still a very linear title. While these areas are massive, there is no bonus content, collectibles, hidden MacGuffins, that kind of stuff. Instead, this is a game that, well, I guess it's not so much pun intended, but it organically grows as you play through it. You'll start with just basic puzzle solving, you'll soon move to action, and you'll get to some more advanced puzzles. The game features puzzles that are both in-universe, as well as some, well, polarizing critical thinking puzzles I'll come back to in a second. Enemies will attack you, but just like in survival horror, they are, for the most part, relatively benign. As long as you can keep ahead of them and just like to move around, you really don't need to fight all that much. I really like kind of the meatiness of everything that's in Scorn. The fact that you have this flesh spire that attaches to you that acts both as your Estus flask and ammo carrier. The fact that you exchange different heads off of your fleshy tool that acts as different weapons. Combat is very methodical and slow paced. This is not going to be a game like the recent Resident Evils, Ultra Kill, and so on. And I kind of like it. But again, combat is not the focus of Scorn, and I should, say that like 5 or 6 more times in this review. But as I said at the start, where you're going to enjoy Scorn really depends on what are you looking for in a survival horror game, and how that term has really shifted over the past decade with how much indie horror has kind of changed the narrative. Even with that said, however, Scorn is not the perfect game, and there are some definitely run enders and game enders that people have to be aware of. I want to talk about all that next. Now, if you're hoping or if you're wondering there will be spoilers, there won't be any for this game. Again, the footage I'm going to be using is going to be fairly nondescript in terms of puzzle solutions and things like that. But with that said, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back to it. And if you're interested in my thoughts on design, then check out my game design books. For entry-level students, we have 20 Essential Games to Study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with more coming soon. Scorn is a very hard game, I think, to review, and it's going to get a lot of polarizing impressions, I think, from other people. As I said in the last part, if you're hoping for a more traditional survival horror game, again, something that you've seen from the indie space in the past 5 to 6 years, Scorn is not that game. It is definitely focused on adventure design, then a little bit on combat, and then a little bit on storytelling. But even with that said, there's still some major churn points and issues with this game. I would have really have liked some kind of maybe like an internal mapping or maybe like a hint guide in some sections. Areas become very maze-like, and the one fleshy appendage wall kind of looks like another fleshy appendage wall, and it's incredibly easy to get lost. The game makes frequent use of critical thinking based puzzles, and a lot has been talked about the opening area, which is by far, in my opinion, the worst part of Scorn. The puzzle there is very slow, it is very annoying to do, involving a lot of moving something around, and even if you kind of figure out the basics of it, it still doesn't really give you I would say, a fair explanation as to what are the rules and mechanics of this world. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people jumped ship, probably within the first 30 minutes of this game. The game really doesn't open up until you are officially in Act 2, and you'll know when that happens, believe me. Once we get this full integration of puzzle solving, adventure exploration, and its very slower paced combat, Scorn is definitely firing on all cylinders, and the game again features some impressive visuals and vistas that are as disturbing as they are incredible to look at. And a lot that I think will keep you motivated to play through this game from start to finish, to see what other ways they can ratchet up the body horror. If you're wondering if this game is mature or adults only, again, there's a lot of body horror in this game. There are no vocals, so swearing and stuff like that's not going to happen. But if you like to see things that have a reasonable number of heads and arms and legs, this is probably not going to be the game for you. Ultimately, for me, I enjoy this one. Is it my all-time favorite horror game or survival horror-esque game? No. But I think it's a really good example of a game that adheres to a specific vision and then nails it all the way through. As I said, if you're curious about this game, the first act, unfortunately, is the weakest part of it. And if you do get stuck in anything, I would really advise to just look up the solutions to the first act. Because once you get past that and the game starts to bear more of its design in front of you, it does improve. And this is one of those games that it does get better as you get further in and you start understanding the puzzles. As an interesting point, it turns out I am really good at parsing body horror related puzzles, which I'm not sure what that says about me. But with that said, we're going to wrap up this review of Scorn here. You'll find my full play of it on the secondary channel. Be sure to do that, liking, subscribing, and commenting. Check out our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.